TFA fam, welcome into the Week 16 Waiver Wire show. Thankfully, it's a pretty quiet week. Not a ton to talk about. Hopefully, you guys are already moving on. Hopefully, you have no Monday sweats to worry about. Kev, let's just dive in, man. Let's give the folks some quarterback streaming options for Week 16.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot here to really discuss. To be fair, if you're playing in Week 16 and you're in the playoffs, you probably don't need to stream anybody. But I did put Daniel Jones on here. He's rostered in 55% of leagues. He's never a sexy option, but his 17.4 fantasy points per week ranks top 12 among all quarterbacks. That was surprising, but he mainly gets it done through his legs. He ranks sixth in carries per game, third in red zone carries, fifth in rushing yards, and I was surprised. This man has 548 rushing yards. I didn't think it was that high, but he also has 5 rushing touchdowns, which ranks fifth. This week the Giants will be taking on a Vikings defense that allow the seventh most fantasy points to quarterbacks and the 27th in pass DVOA. So it's a good matchup for Daniel Jones, but again, not much of a high ceiling. But if you're desperate, he is out there, and just over 45% of leagues. And then you have Brock Purdy. Once again, played pretty well, completed 17 of 26 for 217 yards and 2 touchdowns. 49ers take on a Commanders defense that ranks 14th in pass DVOA and allow the 13th most fantasy points to quarterback. So those would be the two guys that I'd probably be looking at. I know like maybe Russell Wilson might be sitting out there, but I'm not trusting that against the Rams, even though the Rams have been had over and through the air, but I'm not messing with that. And like I said, I think for the most part, people probably already have their quarterbacks for this week.
Yeah, let's head on over to the running backs. Only one injury, obviously, the Jonathan Taylor one. We still don't really know what's going on with it. It doesn't seem like it's a serious injury. But at this point, there's no reason for them to rush him back. So it's possible we get the Zach Moss and Deion Jackson show for the rest of the year. On the Saturday game, Moss had 24 carries to Jackson's 13. He also played 67% of the snaps to Jackson's 32. But obviously, the Colts are trying to cling on to a lead the entire game and, before somehow blowing it. So I do think there's a chance that we see Jackson more involved next week in a matchup against the Chargers on deck. So I think both of these guys could be in play, and it's going to be a little bit closer to a 55-45 type of split going into next week. Next guy, Chuba Hubbard, outsnapped Deonta Foreman today. Foreman had another inefficient week. The dude just hasn't been good for the past 6 weeks, honestly. Today he had 9 yards on 10 carries. Now, Chuba on the ground, frankly, wasn't much better, but he did tack on additional 50 receiving yards. The matchup with Detroit next week isn't great, but if you're desperate, Hubbard's at least being used in the passing game, so I think you could look there in deeper leagues. Jermichael Hasty, we saw Travis Etienne get banged up again, had an ankle injury. He did end up returning. He played I think the Jaguars had 3 overtime snaps. He played all of those, but we have seen before where there are situations where guys end up coming in, they end up being a little bit more injured, and they end up, missing the following week. So Hasty's definitely a guy that I'd want to be looking at and adding for this week, just in case, and even just going down the stretch for the next couple of games. The game that ETN did miss earlier in the season, I think Hasty had almost 80% of the snaps. So he's the only other running back being used and looked at. So Hasty's a guy I'd want to add. Jalen Warren getting more involved again. Really nice handcuff option. I was really surprised to see that he was only rostered in 9% of ESPN leagues. He did see 12 opportunities today, though almost 34% of the snaps, scored a touchdown. Marlon Mack starting to see some more opportunity. I was expecting more of a split in this game. Murray played 44 snaps to Mack's 20, but he's still worth a dart throw, especially in deeper leagues. Jordan Mason worth an add. Kenneth Gainwell is someone who I would like to add, just in case. I'm not overreacting to the Miles Sanders game. It was 100% frustrating for all of us who did put Miles Sanders into our lineup, but I don't think there's anything to read into that. I think that was just a case of Jalen Hurts taking almost 20 carries himself. And then just some other handcuff options. Keontae Ingram, Boston Scott, I think, deserves some love in there with Kenneth Gainwell. Joshua Kelly definitely needs to be rostered, and then Zamir White as a deeper option.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would not be surprised at all if the Colts shut down Jonathan Taylor. It's an injury he's been dealing with for a lot of the season. There's nothing to play for. Shut his ass down. I do think Deion Jackson probably makes a little more sense just because I think he's more of the pass catching back. And, I would not expect them to have 36-point leads, every single week like he did for them to blow. So Deion Jackson would be the guy that I would want out of that group. And then so wide receivers is kind of the same. I don't have a whole lot of guys on here to really talk about. I put Russell Gage on here because he did have a big day today, holding eight of his 12 targets for 59 yards and 2 scores. But that was with Julio Jones out. Gage stepped up and with a hefty 25.9 PPR points, but I think he's very much tied to the availability of Julio Jones, which wouldn't be surprised if Julio is back next week. But they do get a matchup against the Arizona Cardinals next week. So Russell Gage, I think he's at least worth an ad. He probably is still going to play even with Julio if Julio does return, but it's not as sexy without him. So next up, we have Marquise Goodwin. Now, this is one of the injuries we did have. Tyler Lockett with a broken finger. He is likely going to have surgery. He's going to miss at least 1, if not 2 weeks. So next week, the Seahawks do play the Kansas City Chiefs. So this is going to be a matchup where they're going to have to throw the ball a lot. Marquise Goodwin is only rostered in 3% of leagues. And he has had a few big games this year. Week 14, he had 5 for 95 in a score. And week 7, he also had 4 catches, 67 yards, and 2 touchdowns in that game as well. He's been playing roughly about 50% of the snaps as is. You could expect a big bump from there because they don't have a whole lot behind him. So he's definitely going to step into that number 2 role. And I think it could be pretty lucrative for him. So he's actually somebody that I think could be a pretty solid flex option this week, assuming that Tyler Lockett's going to be out, which I expect him to be. So Marquise Goodwin, 3% rostered. He's definitely somebody that I would be looking to add. Next up is Noah Brown. Now, this is somebody that's not just we're not just reacting off of 1 day of information because while he had 6 catches for 49 yards and 2 touchdowns for 22.9 fantasy points, he's also had 15 targets over his last 2 weeks, and he was targeted 9 times today. He was targeted 6 times last week, and he also has put up double-digit fantasy points in back-to-back weeks. So Noah Brown is kind of carving himself out a pretty nice role here for the Dallas Cowboys. And Michael Gallup really has been ineffective. So Noah Brown is only rostered in 1% of leagues. He's somebody that I think we could definitely be taking a look at. McCole Hardman, I fully expect him to be back next week. It sounds like they're just kind of ramping him up. He was activated, or not activated, but he was his time has been started, so he is definitely going to be back. Sounds like this was pretty much precautionary. I think the Chiefs thought they would be able to go into Houston and roll the Texans, and that's not what happened. They were able to get the win, but it was much closer than I think people were expecting with a 14-point, favorites. But regardless of that, McCole Hardman definitely likely back next week. And we have to remember, when he was playing, he had 4 straight weeks of double-digit fantasy points prior to his injury. He was playing really well. They do a lot of things with McCole Hardman, so only rostered in 27% of leagues. So I think you can look there. And then Elijah Moore, he's probably gone in most probably a lot of leagues. But if he is sitting out there, he was holding 4 of 7 targets today with 51 yards. Even with Mike White out, Moore still was a big part of this offense. The Jets will face the Jaguars D, who ranks 30th in pass DVOA. So it is a good matchup next week for Elijah Moore. And then Treylon Burks, I do expect him to return likely this upcoming week. From this concussion he's now missed 2 weeks with. He is rostered in 46% of leagues. If he was dropped by any chance, he should be added. They face the Houston Texans. And then lastly, we have Matt Collins. He continues to be a bigger part of this offense, even with guys like Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller returning. He was targeted another 8 times today, 4 catches, 40 yards, and a score for 14 fantasy points. And the next week, the Raiders face the Pittsburgh Steelers, who allow the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers. So, I think those are all the guys you can look at. I put like Richie James on here. I mean, you have to be pretty desperate to be picking up Richie James. Julio Jones is also another option. But again, he missed this past week with an injury.
Let's wrap it up with the tight end streams. We actually have 2 exciting options here. Juwan Johnson, former Penn State great, had a 2-touchdown performance today on limited snaps as well. I think maybe he only ran like 13 routes or something. Because of the injury that he was nursing coming into this game. Like I said, 2 touchdowns. He has now scored double-digit fantasy points in 5 of his last 7. And then Chig Okonkwo, the rookie continues to be involved. He led the Titans today in targets, ran more routes than Austin Hooper. He had the most snaps just overall and of the entire Titans tight end room. And he now has at least 4 catches, 445 yards in 3 straight games. So 2 solid options. The only thing with Chig would be the fact that they play Houston next week. So may not have to be that involved in the passing game. But I think both those guys are solid options.
Yeah, I agree. Thankfully, we didn't have a lot of major injuries. Obviously, there's still a half of football and a game tomorrow. But as things currently stand, not bad. Could be a lot worse, especially heading into the week before fantasy championships. So yeah, I mean there was some craziness today. That Patriots game. I don't know if you saw what happened at the end of that Patriots Raiders game, but that was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. I don't know what they were doing.
Not, but I saw Walito's comment.
You didn't see at all what happened?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay. So there was no time left in the game. The score's tied. They're going to overtime. They had like 3 seconds left. Obviously, by the time they ran a play for Ramondre Stevenson, Ramondre Stevenson picks up. They had all their guys back like they were going to throw a Hail Mary. And again, it's tie game. They're getting ready to go into overtime. And so they throw it. They get probably 20 or 30 yards. Ramondre Stevenson decides, hey, I'm going to toss it back to Jacoby Myers. Why? I don't know, because you could have just got tackled going to overtime. And then Jacoby Myers takes it and fires that son of a bitch 30 yards or probably like 20 yards back. Like this is like a true, like they have to score, so they're doing all this crazy stuff. Nope. Right to Chandler Jones. Chandler Jones catches it, house calls it, ball game, set, match. All they had to do was fall down. They go to overtime. They can finish it, they can see what happens there. Nope. I have never seen something, so you have to go watch it. It is the most wild play I've ever seen. What they were thinking, I do not know.
That's incredible. No, I was driving my son to the gas station to get him Gatorade because like nighttime drives like make him feel better. So I did not get to see that. I'm definitely gonna have to look that up. That's fantastic.
It is the dumbest thing I have ever seen. I don't know what they were thinking. You would think before is, hey, let's try to pick up some yards, see what happens. If not, fall to the ground. Let's go to overtime. Nope. So I don't know what they were thinking. Only thing I can think of is they thought maybe they lost what was going on there, and they were trying to make something happen. But I mean, Jacoby Myers, that was even worse because like both what they did was dumb. But Jacoby Myers, he launches this thing. I mean, like 20 yards. Like it wasn't like a short little handoff or dump to somebody. I mean, he fires that sucker to Mac Jones of all people. I think is who he was trying to throw to. Like, what are we doing here, Jacoby? Right to Chandler Jones. House call. Game over.
That's incredible. I'm gonna have to look this up.
Yeah, it's bad. So that was bad. And then you had the Bucks game 2, which was just terrible as well. Like they were rolling 17-3, everything's looking great, and then they just couldn't stop turning the ball over. Like they gave the Bengals, I think it was 4 straight drives, like inside the 20 or 30 yard line. They had to do nothing. That was brutal as well. So, anyways, I think we can get out of here. It's just those 2 games stuck out to me, just ugly, bad football. There's a lot of ugly games today.
There's one detail you left out. I'm watching this right now. Is the Chandler Jones just stiff arm of Mac Jones, just to the ground, just runs over him on his way to the end zone. It's fantastic.
Yeah,
good.
Such a change of emotions there. I couldn't imagine. I'm gonna have to see what they say afterwards. I got to know what Jacoby Myers was thinking there, why they did what they did.
Yeah.
So, anyways, let's wrap this thing up. Let's get out of here. Yeah, not Belichick approved. Most definitely not Isaac. So it was pretty bad. So, anyways, hope everybody has a good rest of the night. Hey, it's Christmas week. We are here. We got a lot of games on Saturday. So, but we'll be back again next week to get you guys ready for another week of the fantasy playoffs. Hope everybody had a good week. Hope everybody moved on. We will see you guys here very soon. Have a good rest of the night. Have a good week. Have a good Christmas. We'll talk to you well before that. Goodbye.